We are about to undergo the biggest IPO season in history. So, for those of you that have been following the news, SpaceX, Anthropic, and OpenAI are set to go public. They're all filing or have filed their S1s with the SEC, which is the official regulatory body through which they have to get approved to go public. But by the time a company of the scale of these companies files their S1, it means they're going public. Now, why this is important is because for many reasons. I mean, literally, you can make a case that these are the most important companies of all time. You can make a case that these companies going public and potentially having a successful IPO is what will save the US economy from a recession. If you're more pessimistic, you can make an argument that these companies don't deserve to go public and that they're going public to continue the proliferation of the so-called AI bubble. But this is beyond consequential. The first thing on why this is important is just the sheer size. These three companies are so big in terms of their market capitalization, in terms of their potential market cap in the public markets. It's absolutely insane. So there's going to be about $3.5 trillion worth of market capitalization that's created between these three companies. So Anthropic is trying to list at about $1 trillion, 960 billion to $1 trillion. OpenAI is expected to do it at around the same amount. SpaceX is trying to do a $1.75 trillion valuation. If you go to conservative estimates, you're looking at $3.5 trillion worth of value. To give you an idea how big that is, I mean, there's so many statistics that are mind-blowing about this. I mean, that first of all, the three companies put together would be like the fifth largest economy in the world in terms of GDP. A country as big as India just got to $4 trillion. And that's the entire company. Any of those, SpaceX alone will be more valuable than the total stock markets of most countries, if not every country, minus the US. Anthropic and OpenAI are spending money at a rate that no company in the history of capitalism has ever done. I read recently that Uber spent roughly $35 billion before they became profitable. That's in the entire history of the company. A company that had to price compete, so does Anthropic, but a company that had to price compete with so many players around the entire world in a very regulated industry. And we're speaking about Uber, that had many legal problems. And they spent about $35 billion, again, to fundamentally change the world, to change transportation, to usher in a new market. Anthropic spent, if I'm not mistaken, Anthropic spent that much money in the last 6 months. I mean, just think about that. These OpenAI and Anthropic are spending so much money. SpaceX is also now about to spend so much money because they are now not just a space company, but a data center company, of course, an AI company. So just the sheer size is incredible. The sheer liquidity that's going to be obtained, even though only a fraction of these companies are going to be listed for public trading, the sheer liquidity that's about to be gained is also staggering. And that's what I want to speak about in this video. Right now, it's the greatest time in history to be an entrepreneur. I think this is obvious because A, it's easy because AI has made the cost of entering into a business, you can make an argument zero. I do make that argument. It's not easy to succeed at a business, probably more difficult than ever to succeed, but it's easier to start. The cost of The barrier to entry has been eliminated. With that being said, the next kind of big quotient in a business is funding. And how do you attract funding? Now, the practical answer is funding is available vis-a-vis the private equity markets, venture capital, and is always somewhat inversely proportionate to how much risk an investor is willing to take on versus putting that money into a more established company or a bond or a government security. And so if you're able to generate a lot of returns for the investor because they invested in your startup early, that is the demand, right? That's kind of why people invest into startups. However, there's also always a supply issue in funding. And that's what I think is about to be so revolutionized with these IPOs, which I think nobody is talking about. Everybody's talking about how these IPOs are bad or good, or what they're doing, what they're going to do to retail investors, and why is NASDAQ accelerating their entry into the NASDAQ 100 and all these controversies. I mean, you can't potentially list $3.5 trillion without controversies. And these are some of the most controversial people of all time in Elon Musk and Dario Amodei and Sam Altman and everyone else that's involved. But that's not even the interesting part to me. Maybe because I'm looking at it through a founder's lens. The most interesting part to me is all of the money that's about to be returned to shareholders and employees of these three companies. Because obviously SpaceX, quite old company, almost 20 years or exceeding 20 years, they've had to vest a lot of shares to get to where they are today. It's not a cheap company to run. It's not an easy company to recruit talent for. And so they've given thousands, my understanding is tens of thousands of employees stock options, which they've been waiting patiently. They've been able to sell some of it in secondary offerings and tenders that SpaceX has done, but obviously nothing is as liquid as going public, and nothing is as lucrative for a person holding ESOPs as going public. So just first and foremost, think about how many employees in these three companies got paid most of their income in stock, was not able to sell it on a secondary market, although some of them did, and are now about to liquidate or have the potential to liquidate. They may not liquidate, but they have the potential. What does that do for the economies of, first of all, what does that do for the lives of those employees and the economies that they participate in? So my understanding, SpaceX has, looking here, 15 to 20,000 employees with vested equities. Obviously, nobody has the actual data. We'll see the actual data in this one. OpenAI has 4,000 to 6,000 employees, and Anthropic has 2,500. But all three of these companies have had secondary sales, so that doesn't mean that all of them are holding and desperately waiting for liquidation. But just if you add that up, that's roughly 30,000 people, give or take 25, 30,000 people. They are about to liquidate tens of billions of dollars out of the entire amount that Anthropic, OpenAI, and or SpaceX are trying to raise. Some percentage points will be allocated to those people. Some percentage points in a valuation of 3.5 trillion is tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars. I know that in the last OpenAI secondary, $6.6 billion of ESOPs was liquidated. And that was a restricted secondary where people can only sell a certain amount of shares, employees still had to vest. So we're about to, there's no doubt about it, there's 30,000 millionaires that just were created if they weren't already that. There's probably 30,000 deca-millionaires, and some of them will become 100 millionaires. There's give or take $50 to $100 billion worth of new money coming onto the scene just from the employees of these companies. Now, this is one of the virtuous cycles of American capitalism, Silicon Valley, but just generally kind of the way that markets work. People that make their money in tech, or especially kind of successful exits in startups, all these companies were startups, believe it or not, they tend to reinvest that money there. They'll obviously diversify, and some wealth manager will come around and say, you should do this, Y, and Z. But their heart and their knowledge base is with what they just earned all of this money from. And these people become angel investors and VC fund managers and LPs into VCs. Maybe they'll start their own companies, but there's about to be a lot of money going into the private. I mean, all these companies are also based in one area. Well, SpaceX has moved, but mostly based in one area in the world. And so that market is about to get filled. 30,000 people that can liquidate over $10 million and a lot more in a lot of cases. So that's all that money needs to find a home, which is why I think being a founder right now is incredible. That's the smaller catalyst here, because the bigger catalyst is the people that made the bets on these companies in the first place, the VCs and angel investors into these three companies. They're about to get liquidated, or a portion of their equity is about to get liquidated and retrieve multiple tens of billions of dollars, if not hundreds, back on their investment. Some of them got in at a base. I mean, you can't imagine the entry basis value for some of these companies, right? OpenAI, people raised money at fractional valuations when they were starting, and now continue to raise money. Lots of people on the cap table. If I'm reading here correctly, several hundred people on the OpenAI cap table, several hundred people. These are institutional investors on the Anthropic cap table, and several hundred people, maybe closer to 1,000 people on the SpaceX cap table, about to inherit or about to redeem tens of billions of dollars. Well, the glorious thing about these people is you don't have to speculate on where they're going to put their money. They're putting their money back into this game. These are the people that were already doing this as a professional business. This is their 100x return on the one company that succeeded in their portfolio when all their other companies may have failed. This is the company that justifies to their LPs that we can do this again. We can find the next SpaceX. We can find the next OpenAI. Give us more money. Look at the return we just got. And this is going to inflate the venture capital markets. There's not been another time like this if you want to access capital for a promising company. This is unprecedented. And a lot of founders are not aware of it. So I would definitely position your company in alignment. If you need funding, think about these. These are your candidates. This is the height of the hysteria, and it is an incredible time to be a founder looking for money.